The episode you're about to listen to may contain some sensitive topics and definitely some F-bombs. If those types of things offend you, you might want to determine if this is the right podcast for you. But however you decide to deal with the offensiveness, you're definitely going to want to listen to this final episode in a 3-part series interview with our friend Drew.
Welcome to the Mormon to Medium podcast, where we'll talk about spirituality, the paranormal, religion, and my journey going from Mormon to medium. I'm Nannette Ride. Thanks for listening. Now let's go have some fun.
Don't be afraid. Close your eyes. There's a moon overhead, but the sun will rise. Blood on our lips, such a poisonous bite. The sound of our hearts go bump, bump, bump in the night.
So January 30th, 2014 is actually the day that Cory was murdered. So he was shot through the windshield of his police car. And Drew actually worked for the Utah County Sheriff's Department with Cory. So ripples.
Yeah. Ripples. So let's jump into that. Why was that significant in your faith?
That's a great question. Just for clarification, I worked corrections, Cory worked patrol, so we worked for the same agency.
Right.
I only knew him in passing when I would go down to the patrol side of the department, but I knew who Cory was, and I want to say that he was teaching ethics, or I know that he taught ethics a lot, and it seems to me he had taught 1 or 2 of our ethics classes before he had passed that I was in attendance to. In fact, I'm certain of it over at the Provo Justice Building.
It's true. I actually have that class on CD with him teaching.
Am I in that class? I swear I am. I swear I'm in that class. But
You'll have to see the CD and tell me if you're in that class.
Well, whenever we do ethics now, they like to show that at the beginning, that class.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, it's powerful.
That is very cool.
No, it's really
that
cool.
they still do that and they still
No, they
honor him.
They honor him and they reference his ethics teaching and then go from there. Yeah. He starts all of our ethics trainings, at least the last ones I've been to.
Wow.
Sorry. You didn't know that?
I didn't know.
Yeah. God, there's going to be a lot of tears in this one. Yeah. So Nannette and I are connected by this horrible day, by what follows. It's really February 4th that is my day. But do you need a moment?
I'm okay.
Okay. All right.
You know,
It's just ethics for who Cory was. His integrity was his whole world. And he always talked about the measure of a man.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, but we just had that, I want to say a month ago. I sat there and watched him in that class.
And here I thought that the department didn't give a shit.
That's not true. That's not true.
So thank you for that.
Yeah. Nope. He still talked about it, especially in that class.
That's a big deal. Thank you.
So you weren't expecting that, were you?
I had no idea.
Yeah.
she needed to hear that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So, and please, because I feel like this is our story, you know, I mean, it's your husband, but the way I'm connected and the way that this story has proliferated into our friendship over the years is pretty powerful. But so at the time, let's go back to your question. I want to make sure I'm answering it. So your question was what? Right.
I just want you to tell us about that day and what about that day changed who you were,
Perfect.
who you are.
Okay, that's great. So, you know, you go through your law enforcement career and you think this is going to happen once or twice, right? And you're going to have to deal with it. And because I didn't know him that well, not up to this point, I just was sad because he's a comrade. That's all I need to know, right? It's a brother.
Right.
He's a law enforcement. That's sad. And we felt it. But because he worked for our department, we really felt it.
You felt it even more than most.
Yeah. And if I had known him personally, I'd have felt it even more, you know, but I didn't know Cory at that point personally. I just knew who he was, right? Because we're in our own bubble in corrections.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a brother. He's on our force and he's one of us. And I felt like I was part of that team. I am part of that team. But I was the honor guard supervisor at that time. So you can imagine what I know is coming down the pike in terms of what will be required of me and what I think will be required of me to honor his service.
Well, explain for those who aren't familiar what honor guard is and what that function is.
Okay, so honor guard serves as an auxiliary of most police agencies and highway patrol or state police entities and county entities to render services that provide decorum for things like fundraisers, local county events where they can come and post the colors. That's a big duty of honor guard. But in the extreme, we would also render honors for a fallen officer or a retired officer to the extent that we would fold flags and in some cases provide what they call casket guarding.
Okay, stop.
Yeah.
So were you in charge of the officers that stood over Cory's body then too?
No, I believe that the FOP took that particular assignment.
Okay.
For the state FOP for the highway. They took over filling the calendar, and trust me, everybody fights everybody wants to do that.
Everybody from across the state stood there. At
It
one
just
time
happened
or
at
the
Sergeant
other.
Hoosier's funeral.
Yeah.
You had to fight to get a spot.
Well, and most of the public don't realize that is a thing. Like, you stand over the body day and night, never leaving your comrade.
You take 4 hours.
But, and coming from the widow, it's huge because you feel like your family's been so violated.
Yeah.
And that your safe has been taken away. And I know logically you know that they're dead, but to have harm come to them anymore would just be the worst. And so to know that they're safe and being watched over, the widow can actually rest. Does that make sense?
Sure.
I mean, logically, it doesn't make much sense, but it's really
Oh, no, it makes
what
perfect
happens.
logical sense. I'll take it a step further. And this is my own take on honor guard. But, they call us the thin blue line. We step into the breach, right? As Governor Cox said the other day at that funeral. We step into the breach.
Right.
And we are the last line of defense between chaos and order. That's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us wear different hats in that collective effort, right?
Right.
That thin blue line gets very thick when an officer is killed. It's no longer thin. And we will not tolerate the desecration of someone's memory. We will stand as the biggest freaking buffer you have ever seen between honoring that officer's life and anybody that would seek to impugn the character of the officer, its department, or law enforcement in general. This is why you have people like the civil organization, the Patriot Guard. Mm-hmm. They will come and stand as a buffer around the officers who are standing as a buffer around the family. It's crazy. But yeah, we're not going to put up with it. We are not quiet about an officer's loss of life. And we're going to put on the biggest show you have ever seen. It's deliberate. It's calculated. And we shut down highways. We shut down on-ramps. And for those few hours, all eyes are on that family. And in this case, and as in most cases, the stuff behind the scenes leading up to the funeral, which is the final thing, you have all of this going on. You have officers who literally sit with the body. So the minute that body's released from the medical examiner, there's going to be an officer with that body until it's interred.
Well, and they also have officers who sit in front of the home of the family who lost the officer.
Then and that was going on too. So not only is the family's home guarded, because sometimes you have all sorts of psychotic people out there, especially where they haven't been caught, but there's always somebody with the body. So, I remember Cory being brought to Walker, and
Yes.
And he was never left alone after that, ever.
No. And it was so comforting for our family to know that he was safe.
Yeah, he was, and nobody was going to touch him. And that's just what we do. And even the day of the funeral, you look at the way the hearses come down the highway. You've got 4 officers on each side, motor on each side of that, or 4 total, 2 front, 2 in the back. And then you have a whole host of motors in front, and then his agency back behind. Mm-hmm. That's just what we do.
Yeah.
So I was, my responsibility that day And the days leading up to it were to get my team ready to fold flags, to pre-fold the flags for each of your children. And I believe his mother.
Uh-huh.
So we ended up folding, I think you have 5 children, right?
5 children and his mom. Yes,
Mom.
he did
So we
6.
had 7. We
so
did
7
six,
flags
7
together.
total.
Yeah.
And we saved the last flag for the presiding matriarch, which in that case is you, because you're the wife. You're the wife. So yeah, and had he been single or not been married, then it would have been mom,
Right.
I believe. But yeah, so we fold your flag there on site. And my responsibility was to just make sure that I took care of the flags that day. Because of the scope of the funeral and all things that needed to happen, we broke up all of the other honors, like calling 1042, last call to dispatch and whoever's in charge of them. And then we had the 21 volleys, or 7 gun salute, 21 volleys, or 3 volleys of 7 rounds, which is 21 guns, they call it. But anyhow, somebody else is in charge of that. Then the flyover obviously is handled by people that are, attached to the aviation wing of law enforcement. So, but there's a lot going on. But my particular task that day was to fold flags and then to hold the United States honor flag, which was flown in just for that. And
Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, the United States honor flag is a flag that was flown at ground zero. And then it was flown.
And when you say ground zero, you mean
New
the
York
Twin
City.
Towers.
Twin Towers.
Yeah.
And then it was taken and flown at the Texas State Assembly there. And there was 3 officers that were killed there, and they wanted that flag brought to their memorial. And it just grew from there, as I understand it, to that flag being flown to any time an officer was killed in the line of duty if that agency wanted it. And I believe Heisler is his name, was the gentleman that's in charge of that. And he reached out to our department, and that was flown in, I believe, from Dallas. And a cool experience with that was I got to go to the airport and receive that flag.
Wow.
And I believe, memory serves, that it's got a Secret Service transponder in it. It's like a national relic. And when it's assigned to you, it's yours, and you are accountable for it.
Well, and you have to wear gloves and everything with it.
gloves.
Like, you can't touch it.
No. Then you comes with so many gloves, one for you, the caretaker, and then your team that will be folding. So all of the flags that we folded for your family, we wore the United States honor flag gloves. And I believe we gave those to you.
You did.
Yes.
Yeah, you did. I have them.
I would love to see those, actually. I remember wearing those, and I remember giving those to you. In fact, I have a picture of me walking over. And I knelt down and handed you the flags too. Yeah, I had to say what you say and not break form.
Yeah.
Still, that's a big way how you and I are connected, but it gets more powerful than that. So I remember standing there holding the United States honor flag. And this is where you want me to go now? Because this is where
this is
where the sky cracks.
And the honor flag also has meaning for this funeral because Cory served his mission in New York.
Oh, yes.
So it's kind of a universal tie.
Yeah.
The universe is like, this is part of you. So
that's right. And I, by way of coincidence, graduated high school in upstate New York. So you talk about full circle. There are no coincidences, right?
No.
But anyhow, so I'm standing there holding the United States honor flag, and my team is folding that flag, and I remember looking over at you. I remember looking at your kids, and I have pictures. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't want to make you cry, but I keep those pictures because the picture catches the moment. Like, there's just this look in your face, like, my whole world is sitting in that coffin.
Yep. Facts. My whole world in a dog.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that part.
Tell me about that. Or
Cory's canine Dex.
Yeah.
At the viewing, I opened his casket and put him in there at Cory's feet.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so he's buried with Dex.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
He loved that dog so much. And we had him cremated and his box was in our house. And we didn't know where to put him. And we loved him so much. He just was in our house. And so it felt right. He needed to be with Cory.
That's powerful. I did not know that.
Not very many people do. Now everyone
Now
will,
everyone
but-
does.
So I remember looking over at you, and I remember thinking, what do you say to a woman who's going through this? Like, what do you say? I'm like, there's nothing to say. Like, there are no words. And I thought, well, surely my religion has something, right? It's the balm, right? It's going to heal. It's going to fix. And I thought, I don't know what to say to her. I'm going through my own horror. I mean, not to turn this into me, but I mean, I'm having an experience. I'm there. I'm watching you suffer. And I'm going, oh, I don't like how I feel right now. And I remember pleading and praying and nothing. I couldn't feel anything. And I thought, this is garbage. No matter how worthy or unworthy someone may think I am or am not, why can't I access the Spirit in this moment to comfort me? And I never felt more alone in my life than I did, which is a terrible thing to say if I'm looking at you. Like, what did I lose? You know, and I didn't lose my spouse. Nobody died for me except my comrade. But you know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah, I understand.
you know, it's my loss doesn't even begin to compare to yours. And so I feel incredibly selfish even thinking for a second that I should ask for comfort, that I should be pleading to God, like I should be praying for you, you know. And so I did. That's what I did. I was just like, well, strengthen her, strengthen these kids. We'll deal with me later, right? And so later came, you know. But I remember part of me just died that day. I remember part of me just, and not to be indelicate, but it's the right word. The religion that I grew up with didn't show up when I made it a really simple plea to be comforted. And I remember praying for you, and that felt good. But I just felt so lost. Like this was, maybe it's trauma. Maybe maybe it was a kind of trauma of my own. Again, I don't mean to make it sound like this is my story, but it's just
But it is.
Well, but
it's your
yeah.
perspective.
It's my
of
perspective
The
on
same
it.
story that we experienced.
Yeah.
But it's still your healing journey. It's your perspective, and it's important.
And I just thought, oh man, I cannot feel God right now. This is such a godless moment. I remember saying that very clearly. This is such a godless moment. And yet the thing that I'll never forget is that the source of strength didn't come from above. It came from every uniformed and non-uniformed person standing with you on that cemetery. I have a picture of that too.
Yeah.
And the freezing cold of a February 4th day, I believe it was February 4th.
I think it was the 5th.
Was it the 5th?
I think it was the 5th. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember
Tens of thousands of people.
just crazy.
Yeah.
And I remember standing there watching the caisson come by, and you were on top of that. And
Now remember,
Yeah.
he asked me to marry him in a buggy and a horse-drawn carriage.
I did not know that. So that explains that.
Yeah. And so I didn't even realize that until I got to the cemetery and the horse-drawn carriage comes. Wow. And he looks at me and he says, do you want to drive him to his final resting place?
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
before I cry more,
So I got to drive all the horses and him.
that's so cool.
Yeah.
Remember Fitzgerald Peterson taking all the
Yes.
pictures?
He was amazing. And he's given me so many.
He passed away.
I know. I was heartbroken.
So was I. He was the one person who believed. I shouldn't say the one person. He was the first responder of any kind that ever came up to me and says, I love the work you do in those shadow boxes.
Oh, yeah.
He was the biggest fan of my work with fallen officer memorials. He called me his brother. He said,
Yeah.
you are a very special person. He made me feel so good about what I do. I'll
You
never.
do beautiful work.
Well, thank you.
Just
I'll
gorgeous.
always be grateful for Peterson for that. I mean, I will miss Fitz for that alone, because
Absolutely.
he had a unique way of making you feel special and important when you were around him.
Always.
And he was a big, tough ass captain in fire, but he was.
I didn't see that side.
No, he had the look, but he had a personality of a.
He was very gentle.
just a gentle man.
Yeah.
And he saw good where good was happening.
And the photos he took,
They were crazy.
unreal gorgeous.
So I have a bunch of those. I'll miss him forever.
Some of the snapshots that you had to just be there.
I have a picture with him at the Black and Blue Gala that
Yeah.
we were at, the one that we took our picture. And that's just a prized picture of mine. Like
love
I got
that.
a picture with him. It's so cool. But so anyhow, so my deconstruction, my unraveling starts. I realized something happened at the graveside. I'm like, what's happening here? And I remember going home going, I can't feel the spirit. I can't feel anything. This is terrible. Now, mind you, there's trauma. There's trauma happening
absolutely.
here. I have a comrade who's been killed, but there's also this trauma of feeling betrayed by my religion. And I remember asking myself, what does this remind you of? See, one of the things my therapist has taught me over the years is whenever we're triggered to ask ourselves, what does this remind you of? What does this seem similar to? And then the healing question is, how is it different or how can it be different? And I love doing that. I do that all the time. So I'll encounter a moment and go, oh, this reminds me of that. Okay, now how can it be different?
Yeah. Do you know what's funny about that is just yesterday, Nan and I were driving around.
I saw the look you gave her.
Yeah. Just yesterday we were driving and she goes, you know what? When people are triggered, it is literally an opportunity for them to heal. I was like, wow, that is really profound because it is. You get that triggering moment and most people are like, oh, I'm going to avoid this because I get triggered rather than going, I got triggered. How can I heal from this?
Yeah.
How can I grow from this?
Well, and I knew I was triggered, but I hadn't evolved to the point where I could ask that question.
Right.
Because I was just dealing with the fact that things were unraveling, and that's messy. I know you know this.
I know it's
Where the unraveling can be probably one of the most ugly times in your life because it's
Yep.
chaotic and it doesn't make sense, and you're wanting to make sense, and it's just like, if we're going to clean the wound, we've got to clean it full stop. We've got to clean all of it. And so it's like, no, just dump the antiseptic in and let's stitch it. And it's like, no, that's not how we're going to clean this wound. And it's a really crude analogy. I'm not doing it justice, but yeah, I think you get my point. Theological wounds and existential wounds can be the most problematic because what ends up happening when we deconstruct a religiously held narrative or belief about ourselves is we are deconstructing our identity at times. And if you really want to feel naked, just suddenly realize that you don't know who you are.
You know, it's funny because just days after the funeral, I remember going to church and bearing my testimony, you know, that I knew the church was true. And then when I sat down, I went, I still don't feel anything. I don't feel comfort. So when you're saying you feel these things, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Except for all in the same breath, I'm seeing spirits with my eyes and I'm seeing dark ones in the middle of the day. And I don't know what the hell to do with that. And then I'm seeing where bodies are and how people are murdered and where their bodies are going to be and all the things. Like I'm freaked out and no one is there to help me on top of dealing with the loss of my husband and my children that are a mess. And I mean, I would literally curl up in our master bedroom closet with his clothes on the floor and I would curl up and just sob. Because there was no peace. There was no answer to anything. And I was relentless with God at that point to be like, no, I am not swallowing that he's just gone. It's no.
But there's something deeply beautiful about what you just said. I just pictured you curling up on his clothes in the closet. That's beautiful. Like, that's how you grieved. And you just went there. Like, that may not make sense to anybody else, but it made perfect sense to me. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I hope I do you no disservice.
All I had left was the feeling of his energy and the smell of his clothes. That's all I had. And that's where I went to grieve because I could tangibly touch that. And you know what? I didn't realize that Cory really was there, that my frequency is what was off at the time because I was in such deep, immense grief. But the day that we went to go pick his body up, I went in to take a shower and I'm telling you, I'm still in my scrubs from days before. Okay. Like I'm a mess. I'm wearing his sweatshirt and his ball cap. And in my mind, he's forgotten his toothbrush and he couldn't leave. Right. But I get into the shower and the shower disappears and I see him with my human eyes through this. It's like he's in a window, so I can see him from the waist up and I can see tears in his royal blue eyes. And he talked to me with his mind, not with his mouth. And and my first thought was, you would come to me when I'm naked. And he laughed like that. And then he said, dang it, I thought we had more time. And then he said, I want to know about the guy that killed you. I'm like with my fingers up, like naming things off as I'm still looking straight at him. And he's like, shh, but he said it with his mind, not with his mouth. He goes, shh, I only have a minute, like this with his finger. And then he reaches out and he tips his head and he pets my face with his hand. And he says, you are so beautiful. And I love you so much. I will never, ever leave you. And he was gone that fast. And I stood there with the water spraying in my face, saying, I just saw him with my eyes. And if I can see him once, I can see him again. How do I figure this out? And that was so real. And I'm not crazy. And oh my God, what do I do with this? I went to my bishop. I went to other people in the word and no one could help me. No one. Like, here you're supposed to be the Church of Jesus Christ, but no one could help me. And there were no answers. There was no peace until I went inside of my spirit. And that is where I found peace. So I understand you so much.
Well, I'm going to tell you a story just because I feel prompted to tell it. So to affirm that, the opposite, you meet Cory after he passes, right?
Yeah.
So, God, this can't be. But we keep coming back to my daughter. But so, for the listeners in the podcast, lest you think I'm a well-adjusted man, I've been married and divorced 3 times. There, I said it. And the first 2 marriages were ingloriously short-lived. And I was a student at BYU, and, you get married so you can have sex, right? And then you realize that that's a terrible reason to get married.
Indeed.
Or if Jeff Foxworthy says, if you want free peanuts, you don't have to buy a jumbo jet to get them. There's a lot more cost-efficient ways about going about that. So, so
I love it.
So after my second divorce, I just thought, I'm the common denominator in 2 failed marriages. Maybe it's me. It seemed like an honest self-reflection, So I hired a therapist and started doing work, and I stayed single for 4 years. And I remember after I hope I don't get emotional. This is such a cool story. But I remember it was August 16th. I'll never forget it. August 16th, 2000. I'm just exhausted, emotionally. I'm going to lose another marriage, lose another relationship. I'm going to have another scarlet D on my forehead as a student at BYU. I mean, things just
That's a big deal at BYU.
It's huge. I mean, it's just the scarlet letter. I mean, it's Nathaniel Hawthorne's book all over again, except it's not adultery, it's divorce, right? But what was her name? Hester Prynne. I think that was the character. But anyhow, I felt like Hester Prynne. And see, you're a geek too. Don't even
He
try.
is. Oh, he is.
I like to
know.
read.
Yeah. So anyhow, I've got these scarlet Ds. I've got this woeful self-image, and I'm just full of, riddled with divorce shame. And I figure I've got to get myself healthy, right? I've got to start doing some work because I'm it. And, my therapist succinctly looks at me and says, congratulations, you've married your mom twice.
Oh, snap.
Ouch. How'd that feel?
It hurt, but it was accurate. I'm like, you're wrong. It's a very Freudian reference, but he was right. Because I'd started the session with that bitch this and that bitch that, and boo-hoo. Come here, doc, give me my Band-Aid, right? And I'm just lambasting into the second wife and all the horrible things she had done. And she wasn't the nicest person, but he said, I appreciate that you're hurting and I appreciate that you're in pain. She's not here. You are. I'm not really interested in what she did to you. Not really interested in how terrible a wife she was. I am interested in the man that thought it was okay to be married to that for 3 years. I'd like to talk to him. I'd like to talk to the person that thought it was okay to put up with that type of abuse. Let's talk to him, because that's the only one that's going to fix this situation. I've never forgotten that session. That was a watershed moment in therapy where he just was like, do you want to fix your shit? Because you're the problem. You keep choosing mom. You keep choosing abusive women. Here's why you got to go do work. Because you will marry your mom. You will marry the dynamic you haven't resolved. I promise you, you will.
Well, the universe will give you the same problem
May not be marriage.
over and over and over again
Yep.
until you figure out your shit.
Yep.
Amen.
And so when I went through that, I just was like, oh, I got work to do. But I remember laying there despondent one day, just hopeless. And I know you have some sense of this. And I'm laying on the floor and I fall asleep. And I sleep all day into the night. Like I just don't move. I'm on the floor. I don't move. I lay there all day, all night. And somewhere in the middle of the night, I have this dream. God, I'm going to get emotional. And the room just gets really, really, really white. I'm like, and I've had dreams before, but this was different. And I just looked up and there's this little girl and I can't see her face. But now that I see my little girl, I'm like, that was Maylee. And she says, hang in there, Daddy, I'm coming.
Wow.
And I thought, why the hell am I supposed to get that? Like, it felt cruel. Like I didn't have a wife. Like I had no sense that I'd have a family. But I knew her voice. I'm like, how do you know somebody you've never met? So, I say the opposite. He meets you after he dies. I'm meeting my daughter before she's born. And she's the tether. She's the anchor to Ashley. This is why I can never speak ill of Ashley. She's the mother of that little girl.
Right.
Right. She served her purpose.
Yeah.
And even though she couldn't stay with me, she's the mother of that little girl in that dream. That will always be sacred to me. I won't ever let anybody talk bad about Ashley. Or especially my daughter. But,
What a beautiful experience.
yeah.
Wow.
And so nothing in my religious faith, though, prepared me for that. This was so, and I know you know this from talking to Cory, like you think your religion can explain that experience. It can't even touch it.
No, not
It
even
can't.
close.
Am I right? I mean, was that your
not
sense of
even
it?
close yet?
Nothing in my religion prepared me for the emotionality of that experience. We talk about our dead ancestors. We don't talk about people that we meet before they're born. You have a couple Old Testament references to that. Mostly it's Jesus.
I do.
But I'm just saying, I met my daughter
Yeah.
and she said, hang in there, Daddy, I'm coming. Well, that meant what?
You're
That I
going to
was
be a
going to get
dad
married.
someday.
I'm going to be a dad someday.
Yeah.
I'll probably be married.
Yes.
And so I just
That's
had
hope.
hope.
Yeah.
There you
That's
go.
hope. Yeah.
And so I had this hope that I would, and so I just started to live right so I could meet this little girl. And I felt like every decision I made, every thought I had, every action I took had to be in furtherance of realizing this vision
Right.
that I've been given, And even though I no longer am a practicing or believing member of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, there I said the brand, right?
Oh, Mormon. I had to put balance in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Win for Satan.
Nobody's going to tell me that experience was anything other than what it was.
Exactly.
And I don't need religion to describe
To
it.
describe it, right?
I don't need theological constructs or doctrine to explain. And it's not for anybody else to explain.
But it's a spiritual thing.
But it's spiritual. And I think,
yeah.
I could see you cry when I said it. Like, you could tell the truth of that. Like,
Absolutely.
This is the most real thing I've ever experienced that
Absolutely.
transcends my senses.
Mm-hmm.
Of any experience I've ever had in life that goes beyond my five senses, that was the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it told me, no matter how broken I was at that moment, no matter how messed up my childhood was still informing my partner choices, in marriage. Here I am trying to live the script, stay chaste, marry in the temple. And I keep choosing not so good partners, and I'm not so healthy myself. And yet, whatever is divine and super organizing out there said, I'm going to let you see your daughter.
To give you hope.
I'm going to let you see your future.
Right.
Because I didn't I wasn't hoping a whole lot after that second divorce. I was pretty bad off.
Right.
And so to meet your daughter before she's born and then to know her.
When you held her, you knew.
Well, no, I knew. So I'll never forget this day. I think it was like May. No, it was sometime, I want to say October. It was late October, maybe early November. Ashley and I go to eat at Cafe Rio in Spanish Fork, and she's not feeling so well. And she goes, man, I just have not felt well the past couple of days. And I says, do you think you have the flu? And she's playing with me. She already knows that she's pregnant. And so we're sitting there eating, and she goes, I just found out I'm pregnant. And I said, stop. And I knew it was Maylee.
I just got full body chills.
Yeah. Like as soon as she said that, I said, Maylee's coming, isn't she? And now I didn't know that her name would be Maylee, but I'm like, my little girl's coming.
Yeah.
The girl in the dream. Sure shit. We go to the ultrasound in January, and
it's a girl.
it's very clearly a girl. And then I'm just a giddy mess. And then she said her name is going to be Maylee, and I never fought Ashley. She named all our kids. She did a great job. Our kids have great names, and I'm really grateful to her for that. But she called her Maylee, and so yeah, she was born. And whatever happened with me in the LDS church, nothing could ever touch that experience. I just, for some reason, when you told me about Cory, I thought, well, how cool to tell this side, tell that same kind of story before they were born.
Yeah, definitely.
To meet your daughter before she's born. Nobody will ever tell me that it was a dream.
No. Well, you're not the first person to tell us a similar story. When we talked to Scott the barber, he had a similar situation where he knew this little girl was his daughter that he met while he was actually on a mushroom journey. Yeah. And she was tugging on his leg, and he's like, that's my little girl. Same type of an idea.
Does he have a daughter now?
He does.
Oh, that's so cool.
And he goes, I know that was her, without a doubt.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon. I think these souls are bound to us. I think we are, I don't know, there's like a contract that we are involved in where if we have these connections, we will always have these connections in one way or another. And I strongly believe that.
I feel that way about you guys. Like, not just the people that are my children, consanguinely blood. Just throwing that word at you.
Thank you.
Just to be a jackass.
That's a 5-star word right there.
Like that, Brad? Prevaricator. Yeah, but I feel that way about you guys strongly. I'm like, no, I'm supposed to know them for life. Like,
yes.
Well,
guys,
and you look
if
at
I have like 10 friends, you guys are definitely in the 10 most, or part of that top 10 most influential people.
What's
in my life.
crazy is you
And
two
both of you,
knew each
like
other.
both of you are not just you. Yeah. He is too.
Yeah. But you two knew each other long before we knew each other.
Yeah. And what's funny is that my memory of Brad before I knew that he was with you was very antagonistic. I didn't like Brad. I hated Brad, made my LEO experience miserable. It's because Brad was making me get real with myself. And so you add that lack of confidence that you saw, or the over intellectualizing, which, by the way, my therapist doesn't like my intellectualizing either. So you and her would have a lot to talk about. She's always telling me, no, let's go back to what you were feeling. I know you have all this education, you've done all this therapy. Let's go back to what you were feeling. I never want to feel, right?
Right. So that's going to be the buzzword for the rest of this episode is, what? Drew, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. Bring it, Brad. Brad discovered my brokenness probably better than any other person long before most people did. He was able to call my shit out. But
I think those types of environments where there's a lot of pressure and a lot of uncomfortable situations, bring that up and bring out that opportunity to really delve in and go, okay, where's this person? And you learn to see it, and you learn to recognize it, and you learn to call it out. And it's not always a gentle call out. So I apologize for that.
No, you don't need to apologize.
Look, you're not the only one. I've got other folks who are my cadets who go, yeah, you weren't exactly gentle with me with this.
He was a dick. Let's just say it.
Yeah, but here I am sitting in your home. And we're friends. So I'm probably better off. So how many of them are your friends?
All of them.
All of them.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So you did it right.
Yeah.
So you did it
I
right.
hope so.
Yeah. No, you and your friends do that for you, and I wouldn't have remembered you as a friend that way. But no, what? Just going back to that briefly, and we can tie it into just life. Is what that revealed to me was that I had unresolved trauma. Going through the police academy reminded me that I had a very dysregulated nervous system. I can say that now because I can look back at it with my new education and my new therapeutic insights and go, well, I would see the same thing if I were a trainer. And I'm seeing it with the new hires that I get, the new guys in corrections. I go,
Yeah.
I can really come at this from a very informed way. And I still have that tone like you did with me where I'm like, I appreciate you're going through this. Nevertheless, there's a performance expectation here and I need you to meet it. And if you can't, let's talk about how we can get you there, what we need to do. Does that make sense?
What's the next step?
Yeah, what's the next step? And so, but yeah, so I meet my daughter and that was the tether. So where are we now? Going back to the graveside, you meet Cory. We've left the graveside now. He's interred.
Yeah.
Now it really starts to unravel.
Now where you break open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is part of the story you guys don't know. So here you go. Get ready for a shocking number. I still have the little booklet too. I doubled down because isn't that what we do? When we feel like we're the problem, then isn't that the shtick? Isn't that the rub in the LDS church?
Yeah.
Don't
be a lazy learner. You've got to double down and really start.
A library that tells you I'm not a lazy learner, and me and Sandra Tanner can tell you all about it. But I doubled down and said, whenever you're having a spiritual crisis, you're the problem, right?
Yep.
Couldn't possibly be anything wrong with the theology or the people saying that they speak for God. It's always you. It's always so pejorative. It's a nasty little shtick because on the one hand, you're the object of God's all-loving and omniscient divine attention. Until you're not getting it right, then there must be something wrong with you.
Right.
You're just always the problem.
Right.
And that was exacerbating this sense of self that my mother was beating me and telling me I'm ugly. I was always a bad seed. Now I'm always the problem. I'm a bad seed. I'm not good enough for God. And it's just starting to coalesce into this rolling ball of ugly,
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, well, I'm going to read the Book of Mormon because, it is the most correct book of any book on earth, right?
Of course it is.
Yeah. And so hold on to your hats.
And it's a literal translation and history.
A literal pile of prevaricated bullshit. And prevaricated is putting it really nicely. Most of the stories are like, no, you need to be harsher. But from February, right after the funeral, until June of 2014, I read the Book of Mormon 26 times.
What?
Jeez, Pizzo.
And it was finally on the last time. No, I took notes. There were some days where I had it on Audible and I would run it double. I'd be on the treadmill. I would listen to it at the gym. There are some times where I read the Book of Mormon in 3 days. I did that multiple times because I'm a nerd, right? I thought if I'll just keep reading the book, you talk about a trauma response. Looking back at it now, I had operationalized my theology to be the very source of healing when in fact it was only compounding the trauma. But what ended up happening from reading the Book of Mormon 26 times and not feeling a damn thing was I went, wait a minute. I prayed on a cemetery lawn and got nothing. I exercised what I thought was a sincere gesture of faith by saying, okay, Lord, I didn't feel anything there. I'm going to give you that. Maybe you're wanting me to do something. I'll go ahead and read the Book of Mormon. You said it's the most correct book of any book, right? And I sincerely read it with the desire that something would happen inside me. Imagine reading that book 26 times and not feeling anything.
Well, that's what they tell you, right? Is you read the Book of Mormon and you'll know it's true. You'll feel that it's true. You'll have a testimony that it is true after just reading it once, right?
Dude,
But 26 times.
I read First Nephi 26 times.
I, Nephi, having been born of goodly parents.
I Nephi, who had rich-ass parents and made my life cush in the Middle East. Yeah.
We shouldn't make light because there are some people who really still believe in that very, very heavily, but because you weren't a lazy learner and because you jumped into it wholeheartedly.
I thought it was the most faithful gesture I'd ever made in my life.
Yeah.
But the most faithful was pleading on the cemetery lawn, looking at you and feeling that void and going, God, please, to use the Joseph Smith language, why are you covering? Where's the pavilion? Well, why aren't you here? Do you not see what's happening? Do you not see what's going on here? Could you please just be here with me? Nothing.
But that was your answer.
Oh, you bet it was.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, no, maybe it's me. I'll just read the Book of Mormon. Nothing. And I went, you don't answer my prayers. I don't feel anything when I read the Book of Mormon. I'm sorry. Those are pretty big gestures. And I'm doing the best I believe that I can. And I thought, and this is where Mom's voice comes up again. Here's where all that no confidence comes up. Well, it must be me. I just must not be a good person. I was like, no. And I remember slamming my fist down, going, no, it's not me. Something's wrong here.
Yeah.
Did you ever have discussions with any of your ecclesiastical leaders about this?
No. I knew they weren't going to be the answer, and I didn't trust them anyhow. They're all keepers of the keys at Hogwarts, man. You don't get to crack that code. They're all PR. They're all just making sure the PR looks good.
Yeah.
That's all they do.
Well, there's a reason they have attorneys on retainer that pick up the phone anytime they call.
Screw the victim. Let's make sure that legally we can come out smelling like roses on this one. Give me a break.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, anyhow, I said, something's not right here. And this is right about the time that I stumbled upon one of the books I had in my library by Fawn Brody called No Man Knows My History. And she was excoriated. She was a pariah after she wrote this book. And it was a more authentic portrayal of Joseph Smith. I want to say 60s. She was I think the niece of David O. McKay, but she was excoriated for writing this book. I thought, why? If the history is what it is, let's just read it. And I thought, well, I'm going to read this.
Because we hide our history.
Or we prevaricate our history. That's the proper use of that word. Yeah, we just mix it with a little bit of truth, or we leave out details like she was 14 years old. I don't know. So, story for another day.
Well, or Emma didn't really appreciate all of the plural marriage. She didn't appreciate all of the other stuff either.
Yeah,
but all you hear about is she was such a loving, kind wife. They had such a great relationship.
Yeah.
Until you read Mormon Enigma and you go, wait a minute. She called bullshit from the very beginning.
She sure did. Yeah, well, yeah, their book. I have that book too. Mormon Enigma.
Yeah.
I forget who authored that, but
The two ladies.
Yeah, there's two ladies.
I can't think of their names either.
Yeah, I thought one of them was an attorney. One of them was, but anyhow, I could be wrong on that. But the book that was the watershed moment for me, the book that turned everything on its head, because, well, let me backtrack for a second. So I read that book and I went, wow, I did not know that. And so my next question was, what else don't I know?
Yeah.
That was kind of the watershed question. I went, wait, why didn't I know about this? This isn't in I didn't learn that in seminary.
Well, and that's the next question you have to ask is, why don't I know this?
There you go.
Why was I not taught this?
Yeah.
You Brad Wilcox it and go, well, maybe the question isn't, what else don't I know? Maybe the question needs to be, Drew, why don't I know this?
Yeah. The question isn't why did Joseph Smith marry mothers and daughters? It should be, why did he marry the grandma too?
Exactly. Let's Brad Wilcox this.
Yeah, no, Brad, that sounded really creepy all over the place.
Right, but people hear that stuff and they go, oh yeah, Brad Wilcox, he's such a great speaker and he's so wise in the way he makes it so I just understand.
Oh, the lilt and the condescension in all of their voices, their tone. They prey on these young, suspecting minds that are just full of hormones that are need for sensationalism.
Yep.
I mean, give them glow sticks and some EDM music, and they would believe anything, man. It's just the goofiest shit.
To go speak in iambic pentameter as you give your conference talk, and people will feel it.
It's like, when they say that you can see, what are they, the chiasmus? There's like, you could see that this is clearly a true book because of the chiasmus. I'm like, he plagiarized it. Of course it has chiasmus. Oh, never mind. I'm just never mind. But
Sorry, I tend to sidetrack these
yeah,
conversations.
no, it's good.
Right.
He's 14.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah, you're old enough to have a vision for an entire church.
Oh, see, that is my new response to you, Nan. You're right. Thank you, Drew. Thank you.
Dude, have an epiphany and start a church, dude, but
Yep.
you ain't getting any of my money.
What's the reason then? You know, that's kind of like any cult, right? Cults are pretty cool if you're the leader. 'Cause-
Right. It's true if you're the leader. Anyhow, so
No, Tyler, we are not starting a cult.
I won't.
That's our
tonight.
son. He's worried about us a little.
Are you starting a cult?
No,
We could. We'd make a lot of money. Could we start a cult? You might be able
just
to.
have to be charismatic enough. Then you have to isolate the women from the men, and then make sure you do that.
Yeah, that'll never happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and have rife with patriarchy. Anyhow, so I thought, why don't I know this thing? So then I went and read the book that nuclear destruction to everything. Michael D. Quinn, Mormonism and the Magic Worldview. That book was catastrophic to me. It demonstrated, and this is a Yale-educated historian that the church hired, who sadly became, I believe, one of the September 6 when Boyd K. Packer was trying to clean house. But he authored this book called Mormonism, Magic Worldview. He went on to write a 3-book tome on the priesthood. I think one of them is called Extensions of Power, the other one. But it looked at the genesis of LDS priesthood and the fact that you can see the power structure and the power elite come from 6 bloodlines out of Nauvoo, I believe it is. And it looks at how priesthood is tied to those bloodlines in one sense. And but anyhow, let's go back to Mormonism, Magic Worldview. Yeah, we talk about cults. I mean, Joseph Smith was clearly influenced by the occult or magic
Oh, yeah.
and mysticism, and
Yep.
you know,
100%.
he's wearing the Jupiter talisman.
Yep.
He's drawing circles with pentagrams and slitting goats' throats and trying to find Captain Kidd's treasure. And somebody here in the circle isn't worthy enough, and that's why we can't keep him. The treasure keeps getting pulled back down to earth. I mean, just goofy stuff, and people are buying this. You know, or you look at his plagiarizing of Masonic rituals.
Why do you think people bought this stuff? Because I don't see me buying it.
Buying what?
Buying any of his shit. Like, I don't think I would have.
But you
You
did.
mean at the time?
At the time, if I lived there
Okay.
and was watching this happen, I would be like, yeah, he's nuts. Like, I don't understand. He must have been so charismatic and so on his game. I mean, how do you even keep the lies straight? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Well, that's just it. I mean, we have the opportunity now to know things that I would suspect that people didn't know back then. You look at the Bainbridge trial, you know, his looking glass, they call it the looking glass trial, where he was declared a public nuisance for scrying and going out and trying to find water for farmers. And, you know, there's a lot of people want to argue that and say, well, it wasn't really a trial. He wasn't really convicted, but he was. We have the documents that show that he was in fact charged with that and told to knock it off, basically. And yeah, but your question was, why didn't they see it?
yeah.
That's a great question. I don't know how to. I mean, it's historical conjecture on my part, but I do believe that he was charismatic. I'm dumbfounded that he was able to get 11 people that we now historically call the 3 and the 8 witnesses.
Exactly.
You'll never convince me that any of them, we know, at least with the 3 witnesses, they saw them with their spiritual eyes.
Yeah.
What the hell does that mean? How do you put that on trial? Could you imagine showing
you
up as a
can't.
witness to a trial and going, Your Honor, I didn't see the murder. I just saw it with my spiritual eyes. Something you should have told your attorney before we came to trial, you know?
Yeah.
But just think how goofy that sounds. If you're going to say you're a witness, that's why I invoke the
trial.
the trial analogy. You said you're a witness. That means you saw them. And then you're going to, historically revise that comment to, well, they saw it with their spiritual eyes. Well, why the hell should I be beholden to that?
Well, a lot of
I
things.
see a lot of things when I take a lot of caffeine and when I'm on opiates, but that doesn't make it true.
Well, and a lot of things have changed throughout the years, right? It's been, this is a literal history to, no, it's just an interpretation. Or this is a literal translation to, no, it's an interpretation. So little things like that have changed throughout the history of the church. And it's not uncommon for them to make it into something that seems more positive for them at the time that they need it.
And all of these people, mind you, end up in the leadership of the church.
Yes.
So they're all drinking from the same Kool-Aid, and they all want to, this is a power play. If we go along with the ruse and if we can just grift these people into believing us, we can set up a church, we can have an organization. We can get people to believe anything we say. Mm-hmm. And then when he starts to have, his power changed in, I believe it's Kirtland, this is where you suddenly have this mysterious revelation on, Joseph Smith is the only one called in the oracle because there was about to be a mutiny.
Yeah.
And then you get this mysterious revelation on priesthood power and we didn't even know about the priesthood until this revelation year. I'm like, how did you organize the church? Because the priesthood doesn't show up until later.
Right.
That's an excellent point.
It makes zero sense.
How is the church organized? You told us this
Drew,
whole...
it was organized line upon line, precept upon precept.
Yeah, here a little, there a little.
Yep.
Here not so much.
Only just in the time that God knew it was right to give.
So
That's why it changes.
So I start to read all this, and then I'm like, and now I'm not happy. Now I'm like, no. Now you made me mad, and I'm an academic. Newsflash, we all knew that in this podcast, but I'm like, okay, if I'm going to have talking points or argue, I'm going to have data points. I'm going to know what I'm talking about. I just reference books that I've read. Like, I'm going to go read Mormonism in the Magic Worldview. You won't be the same person after you read that. You will tell me you think Joseph Smith is a prophet. I really want to hear you say that after you read that book with a straight face.
Well, wasn't it just written by someone who hated the church and just wanted to besmirch the church?
They sure love their PhDs that they hire from Yale until they're not willing to preach the sermon, to play along with the game. D. Michael Quinn was a very, very well-documented historian. His footnotes are second to none. He knew exactly what the hell he was talking about. He knew a source for everything. You can see it in his footnotes. I know because I have the books and I sat with him and he signed all of them.
That's cool.
Before he died.
That's awesome.
No, it was amazing. I sat and talked with him. He was an amazing individual. And I had such respect.
Well, especially to be able to go to someone like that and go, your books changed my life.
Oh,
literally.
His books alone they're the books. Like if I never read any other books, Mormonism and the Magic Worldview, and then his hierarchy, his three tomes. I mean, these are exhaustive books on priesthood power, the evolution of priesthood in the church. They alone were enough to just destroy it all. It's really interesting. I say stuff like that, and then you get the apologists, the defenders of the church, and it was like, well, that's just really sad. Very condescending comment. And I said, there is such a thing as exculpatory evidence or damning evidence. And some things you just can't undo once you know them.
Yeah.
And so for me, I doubled down and I just said, okay, I don't know about all this other stuff, the temple ceremony, whether, where the 116 pages, I think, what was the guy that was scribing for him when he was doing the 116 pages that were lost?
Was it Pratt?
Who was the scribe? No,
Oliver Cowdery?
Oliver Cowdery.
No, Martin Harris.
Oh, Martin Harris?
I think Martin Harris's wife took those pages. I'm absolutely convinced of it.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, she did.
And she absolutely
her
took
whole thing
those.
was, let's see if he can do it again.
Okay, but
if
where
he
did she put them? 'Cause they've
translated
gotta
it,
be
he can do it
somewhere.
again.
I just think she took him, but I think Brad, she was going to say, all right, Mr. Prophet,
Show me again.
verbatim, do it again.
Yeah.
She was going to go to her husband and say, quit giving this fucker money.
Yeah.
He can't do it again.
Well, he mortgaged his farm, $10,000. That's probably a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy stuff. So I think she was on to it.
Yep.
But so then I doubled down and I go, nope. All right, what else don't I know? So then I went to Sandra Tanna's store. Sandra is it. Sandra and Gerald Tanner are not arguably, they are the biggest critics the LDS Church has ever known. And they took the LDS Church to task on so many lawsuits when the church would come after them for publishing things about the temple and other things like that. And they won. They were the ones that figured out that the salamander letter was a fake
Are you serious?
and phony. So Mark Hoffman takes the letter into them. I've talked to Sandra about this, and she didn't say a whole lot, but she knew. She knew that it was she was like, no.
So he tried to sell it to them first.
She was trying. Yes, he was trying to peddle his wares to her. And
So for those of you who don't know, Mark Hoffman actually created forgeries of several historical documents, especially when it pertained to the church, because he knew that the LDS Church would pay very well for some of these documents that were supposedly legitimate.
well, and the reason he knew they would pay is because they wanted to keep the story quiet, because the story ran counter to the narrative of how Joseph Smith had his first vision.
Yeah.
This particular version of the first vision would have you believe that a salamander spoke to him, and the church wanted nothing to do with that. And yet he had presented it such that it was a legitimate document. And so this is bad PR. So here are the keepers of the keys, the most inspired men who in the Book of Mormon are, they have men apparently who have the priesthood in the Book of Mormon, same priesthood they do, who a king is killed, and this king is able to sit on his throne. I think it's 3rd or 4th Nephi, and they're able. And this king is able to tell you who killed, or the prophet Nephi is able to tell you who killed the king, right? And yet here are these men with the same priesthood, all these hundreds of years later, same priesthood, same authority,
They can't
allegedly,
tell that it's fake.
and they have a thief in their midst, grifting them for, I think it's like $800,000 worth of archives, something similar value. I don't think they tendered money.
Well,
I think
because
they
he kept
traded
going
archives.
back and
he
giving
was-
them document after
Yeah.
document.
And they were like, what is this? But there's my favorite photo ever is it's like Hinckley, and you can see Holland, I think, is in it. And there's a couple other of the key players. And there he is handing him the salamander letter. And it's this big news article. And until he goes and blows up some people. And
Wow.
I'm like, wow. So where was the gift of discernment?
Yeah, where's the priesthood there?
This dude is a murderous, lying thief. And you bought it lock, stock,
Where's
and
your
barrel.
Messiah now, Moses?
and
feel
you're
that?
you're gonna tell me when the Savior's like, you're just like, what? Like, I can't think of a moment more important in LDS history since I've been alive that would have really been cool for them to have the gift of discernment show up.
Yeah.
Or the
And
pandemic?
it
Yeah.
didn't. It didn't show up.
No.
And they talk about the very elect being deceived. Well, it happened that day, and there's a photograph to prove it. And so what do you do with that? And yet this is what they do. They're
Or do we need to ask, are they actually the very elect?
yeah. Or what they were thinking as men that day. That's what.
Yes,
that's what
they
it
were-
was.
they-
They weren't acting in their
yes.
office as leaders. They were just men that day.
They were just acting as men, not as prophets of
Yeah,
the Lord.
so that's why it went down.
My bullshit meter's going up so bad.
It's so bad.
Well, there's so many phrases like that you hear and you're just like, are you shitting me? You can literally justify anything because of that. Like I said, the line upon line, precept upon precept, right? It'll all come forth in God's time.
Yeah.
Oh, he was speaking as a man,
Very
not a prophet.
thought-stopping behavior.
Yeah.
Just
Or
stop thinking.
you have to just listen to modern day prophets. You can't listen to prior prophets. So literally your entire base for your religion dies because those were prior prophets,
Yeah, well,
not
then
the
we
current
shouldn't read the
prophet.
Bible.
Yeah, we shouldn't read the Bible. We shouldn't read the Book of Mormon.
Definitely
We shouldn't
shouldn't read
listen
the
to
Book of Mormon.
Joseph Smith. We shouldn't listen to DNC. We shouldn't read any of that because that's all past prophets. All we should have right now is Russell M.
Brad, once the prophet has spoken, the thinking has been done.
Yeah, the debate is over.
Yeah. So the debate wasn't over for me.
Piso.
And
kept going.
So I continued to read and read. And so I filled my books with just about everything Sandra sold in her store that was germane to topics that were important to me. And we'll get to maybe we'll just wrap up with this one, but or at least this part of the story. So I started to look at I started looking at what it meant to be Mormon, and then thinking, wait, I got to go tabula rasa here, clean slate. Like, I don't know what to believe anymore, and I don't know what to disbelieve, but something is wrong. You just know something's wrong. Think about when you've been doing investigations and you just know but you're going to need more evidence really but you know something's off. Something's not right, but you're not sure what it is. But you got to keep digging until you can get to something that'll help explain why you feel the way you do. The hunch, right?
Can I stop you for just a minute? Tell me what tabula rasa is, because I've only heard it on John Wick.
Oh, clean slate. It's
Okay.
Latin for clean
Thank you.
slate. Yeah.
Could you remember? He tells
Does John Wick say? Do you say John Wick?
tabula rasa.
Oh.
No. The little guy who runs the hotel.
Oh, okay. So anyhow, I just do. I was like, I'm gonna have to clean slate my brain, but you can't really clean slate your brain, right? Because you can't forget all of your experiences, right?
No.
So that's the crucible of it all. Is you're wanting to do that, but you have all of this information, and it's just sitting there going, something's not right here. So here's the thing: we are raised to believe when the prophet has spoken, the decision has been made, right?
Yep.
That is very culty behavior. That is very thought-stopping behavior. And I invoke the J. Reuben Clark quote that says, if we have the truth, it cannot be harmed by investigation. If we have not the truth, it ought to be harmed by investigation.
Yes.
Amen.
And so
And that's from BYU.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a good man. Well, until I think he dealt with our friend down here that wrote about the Mountain Meadows Massacre. Oh my gosh, her name slips my name and I'm embarrassed that I can't remember it. She's buried down here in St. George. But she went to get the affidavits about what happened in the Mountain Meadow Massacre, and they ended up not giving them to her. Made me really, really mad.
What?
I'm embarrassed I can't remember her name. She is probably one of the most outspoken authorities on the Mountain Meadows Massacre besides Bill Bagley, who wrote Blood of the Prophets, and that is a scathing indictment of Brigham Young.
Yeah.
It's that book is harsh, but and deservedly so. So anyhow, I went to Sandra's store. I bought a bunch of stuff, and I said, I'm going to go about this like I would a trial. And so I said, Joseph Smith claims to be called of God, and that he wrote the Book of Mormon. And I thought, and that he was inspired to write the Book of Mormon or translate. And we now understand that translate means to see letters hovering above a glowing rock. If we listen to our flight surgeon, apostle, whatever his name is, the guy from Germany, Uchtdorf, who, he gave us that analogy. I think one other
Everybody loves him.
Yeah. Don't they?
Yeah. Okay. Anecdotal. Nan, it's time for you to tell your Uchtdorf story. I don't think you've told it on the show yet.
So I was taken to go have lunch with all of the prophets, or all of the general authorities,
Post, is this
post Cory. Yeah.
like they invited you because of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so my Area 7D took me up to the church office building in Salt Lake City.
The Great and Spacious Building?
Great and Spacious Building, yeah. Wow. And I got to go, and the first person I met as we were walking in was the General Young Women's President, and I had my daughter with me. And she was very kind, really sweet to my daughter. We had our picture taken with her. And then Uchtdorf came walking up, and he's short, by the way.
Huh?
Yeah, he's short. He looks tall. He's not.
They do that shit at the General Conference, don't they?
Anyway, he comes walking up, and my Area 70 says, yeah, this is Sister Ride. Her husband was an officer that was killed in the line of duty, blah, 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 blah. Introduces me. He shakes my hand and smiles at me. And I said, you are one of my favorite speakers. And he pulls his hand back and he laughs and he goes, ha, I'm everyone's favorite. And then he walked away. I went, where's Christ? I'm falling apart right now. And where's Christ? I felt nothing.
He said, I'm everyone's favorite.
And walked away.
That was his response to, this is a grieving widow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you believe that?
Tone deaf. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about pride, arrogance?
I'm so sorry for your loss. How can
Nothing like
How can
that.
I help you?
Nothing like that.
Come
there
sit
was
with-
no
come sit with me
compassion.
for a minute.
Right.
There was no compassion. None.
Wow.
None.
Well, sometimes you can be so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good.
Oh.
I like that.
So I said that out loud. So
That's a great phrase. I'm going to steal that.
I wish it was mine.
That is going to be the title of this show. Heavenly minded, no earthly good.
Yeah. And I've always thought that way about leadership. It's just people that are pious, where they wear their piety and their religious declarations like a cloak. It's like Superman. I'm like, yeah, but I don't relate to you. See, when I tell you about sexual abuse and that one of your stake presidents was doing it to my sister, or stake high councilman, you don't want to have that discussion.
No.
You tell me that children are a heritage of the Lord, and until you have to deal with the ones that your very elected leaders are abusing. You never want to have that conversation. You want to run over to Curtin and McConkey before you talk to me.
Right?
Where's your priesthood power now? It's not priesthood power, it's legal power.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's an image control thing. They don't ever want to have that conversation. They don't really want to administer to people.
Well, and that's just it. Through my whole luncheon, I didn't feel Christ. I didn't feel that love that I thought that I would.
No, because you're going into a corporation's business office.
It was like signing up to get autographs.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, when you're part of a board of governors that oversees a $125 billion war chest, I mean, you've got more important things to do.
Exactly. I was literally nothing.
Yeah.
I was nothing. My little girl was nothing. And here, this is her dad at 14 years old.
You were the widow with a mite. And it wasn't enough.
Nope.
And they couldn't begin to give you what you needed. Not likely.
Yeah.
Not likely.
No answers, no love, no comfort. Just
let me show you how
I
cool
felt like I
and
didn't
righteous I
belong.
am.
Like I always felt like I didn't belong. But yeah.
Well, and in fairness, to a lot of people, it's not that you don't belong. A lot of people aren't going to be qualified to sit with you in that type of pain. And here's the thing. The people that really follow that man in that picture right there will be able to sit with you in that pain. They'll realize that it's not a competition. They'll realize that to sit with you. I mean, isn't that what it says? To grieve with, to sit with those who are grieving,
Mm-hmm.
to suffer with those that suffer.
Right.
Sometimes to sit and feel with people means you keep your mouth shut.
You just feel.
You hold their hand and you say, I'm here.
Yep.
And I'm here. And if you want to talk, great. If you don't, I'm going to sit here and feel with you. I'm going to feel through this with you. If you need to borrow strength, if you need to borrow energy, I got you.
And that's love.
Yep.
That is love.
Yeah, you don't need to give it words.
That sounds like Justin. We need to get him sitting down in a room with Justin. They would love each other.
Oh my gosh, the two of you. Would you come back?
They're so similar.
You and Justin think that a lot alike. Wow. He's our counselor.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
I have a lot of...
We could literally just sit the two of them in here and just listen.
I'm bombastic, but I do have a tender side. All of my experiences have given me tender. But let's do the jurisprudence dissection of Joseph Smith, because it's how it all ended for me.
Yeah, let's roll to that.
So the coup de grace, the whack that does it all in, it's a sequence of logical formulations, a syllogism. So if A, then B. So if I can impeach Joseph Smith's claim that he translated the Book of Mormon, then I can disbelieve everything he did after that. It's kind of the fruits of the tainted vine sort of idea.
Fair.
Now, fruits of the tainted vine would say, legally that you acquired evidence illegally, ergo everything you can't everything beyond that is thrown out. Yep. If everything beyond that followed from the acquisition of that illegally gotten evidence, then it's all gone. And so you see this also with witnesses in trials who are impeached mid-trial. They're proven to be liars, and then they'll say you can disregard their entire testimony wholesale. They've proven themselves to be so dishonest and the scope of their testimony that you can just disregard their testimony entirely. This has happened. It's very rare, but it's telling moments in trial. So I thought, if I can impeach Joseph Smith as a prophet, then I don't need to worry about any of the fruits that came from him. Right. They will all be tainted. And we see that. So I began by studying the Book of Mormon in earnest and looking at the myriad theories out there, the Mesoamerican model theory that says, well, all of these stories come out of Central America, and you get B.H. Matthews, I think is his name, and Roberts that goes down there, and they're all looking for evidence. And they sadly have to go back and say, we found nothing. There's just nothing. And I'm like, so how do we get these bold claims about a book to be the most true book of God on earth? We have this cock and bull story about 3 and 8 witnesses, but nobody really ever physically saw them.
Right.
You have tin plates under a piece of cloth that he rattles and it makes some noise. Gold weighing what it would weigh wouldn't make that type of sound. So how do you have this explanation that you heard plates rattling? Gold, you wouldn't hear rattle.
No.
It's so malleable and heavy, it wouldn't make that type of noise. You've had these experts talk about that. So I have that going on, and I'm looking at the different models of Book of Mormon history that could possibly explain it. And then, lo and behold, you start to have all of this new science come forward and say, we didn't have steel in America pre-Columbus. We didn't have horses. Then we look at the haplo studies of blood types. And we can see now that most of the Native American Indians come from some source up in the Inuits up in Alaska, not the Middle East. I think that's what it says. I could be wrong on that, but it definitely doesn't come from the Middle East.
Right.
So you could tell that he was borrowing heavily from Ethan Smith's view of the Hebrews to we got to get this whole idea of Israel and America, and we're going to gather and finally go back to our motherland. And there's no evidence that supports this bloodline of any of the houses of Israel, let alone Israel blood being here in America. It's Native Americans.
Exactly.
What a terribly racist thing to do, to come here and then go out and try and indoctrinate, colonize, as it were, just like the Catholics did South America. Native Americans try and teach them the Book of Mormon and say, well, you're this group of people in this book, and oh, by the way, you're sinful and dirty, but if you believe what we believe, you'll get white.
Yeah.
Good grief.
Yep.
As they stole the children and...
Well, they were trying to make them more white and delightsome. And
Well, you see that quote. Kimball, I think it was Kimball that said it. Like, we can see the Native American exchange program working. The kids are learning more and more, and their skin's getting whiter and whiter. Oh my God, that's a matter of record. Like you said that.
yeah. Well, he was speaking as a man, not as a prophet.
Speaking as a racist.
You're supposed to forget all the older prophets, remember? But remember, Hinckley had said at one point, I can't say it verbatim, you both probably know this, but either the church is the greatest, I think it's miracle or story of all time,
Or it's the biggest fraud.
or it's the biggest fraud.
Yeah.
I mean, their own prophets said that. And so when you start to disprove the actual basis of the church, it's the biggest fraud.
So I was able to do that. I was able to
Absolutely.
persuade myself beyond a reasonable doubt that he was in fact not inspired, that he was a charlatan, that he was grifting people. And all we have to do is take, for example, the woeful practice and doctrine of polygamy and say, did Joseph Smith practice polygamy the way he said in section 132? No. It's a 3-pronged test. Okay, none of which he did.
Right.
First of all, the prime wife had to consent. So how many times did all these other women consent? How many times do we have a record of Emma consenting to all these other 38 women, according to the historian out of UCLA? I forget his name too, but I have his book, Todd Compton, in Sacred Loneliness. I mean, he goes through each and humanizes each of these wives, But I'd like to know how many of them Emma knew about.
Yeah.
We don't have much record of that. So that prongs out. Then it said that polygamy was practiced to bear the souls of men. That's another fancy way of saying have children.
Have babies.
How many children were born of these polygamous marriages?
Right.
That's 2 of the 3 prongs. I can't remember the third one. But those 2 always got me. I'm like, we know that Emma didn't know. We know that she was disgruntled, to say the least.
Right.
And then we don't have any children coming from that. Yeah. Why wasn't he having lots of children with all these women? It was a divine practice, right? Well, we know why.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a ruse. It was a doctrinal ruse to justify his philandering.
The crazy thing about that is my entire life, I was always taught in church that the reason polygamy ever even happened was because as the pioneers came across the plains, many of the men would die, and it left these women who needed to be taken care of. And so they would be married off to these men who could take care of them and provide for them.
I was taught the same thing. Yeah.
That was my teaching from the time I was a child.
Or the fact that they left Kirtland and Nauvoo was because they were being persecuted.
Yeah.
No, they wanted to kill Joseph Smith, and he was pissing off the natives.
Yep.
Nauvoo, what happens in Carthage? he violated the most sacrosanct U.S. constitutional, the very first constitutional right we have, freedom of the press. He pissed off the assembly of Chicago or of Illinois. He pissed off the body politic. You went and destroyed a printing press to hide your dirty secrets. You just committed a federal felony. So I mean, yeah, this isn't the behavior of a man of God. He gets kicked out of Kirtland. Why? Because he's trying to bed some other man's daughter.
Yeah, which is why he got tarred and feathered.
Yes. Not because
and they were going to castrate him. And the only reason he didn't castrate him is because the doctor who was there to do it went, I can't do this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but the story we hear is, they always want to make him the martyr.
Yes.
Like, bro was bringing this shit on himself. Keep your pants zipped, and maybe you'd have a few more people in church. But he was trying to bed everybody.
Well, he's making his own congregation.
Except he wasn't.
Yeah.
He wasn't getting anybody pregnant.
Well, I don't know how much validity there is to
Sylvia
this, but I heard he
Johnson's
had
the only
a
one.
doctor basically on staff who
John C. Bennett.
Yeah.
He's rumored. John C. Bennett's rumored. That's speculation.
he was the abortionist.
Yeah.
That's
What?
the rumor.
I've never heard that. What?
I've heard that, but
Yeah.
I haven't read anything to support that, but I've heard that. But it is telling that he would have a Dr. John C. Bennett. John C. Bennett and him finally had it out. Yeah, he finally figured it out for what it was. There was all sorts of shit going on in Kirtland.
What the crap?
My gosh. They were going off and getting married in the woods.
What?
Yeah, they were going off and he was performing sealings in the woods.
Well, but they were just spiritual marriages. Drew.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
my
you don't
gosh.
need to bear the souls of men if you're just getting married spiritually.
No, that
what
happens
is
on
that
the
for-
other side.
Oh, okay.
That
yeah.
happens after you die.
It doesn't say that in the Doctrine and Covenants. I'm sorry. Is that in the footnotes? Is that the inspired version of the Doctrine and Covenants? I didn't know you had to inspire your own version.
Now that I'm not in the church and Cory doesn't have a forever wife, I'm sure his family can get somebody else sealed to him, right? Yeah.
But do you think Cory would have anything to do with this?
Absolutely not.
Of
No,
course.
he would. He was exiting stage right, just for the record. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
he was there because he knew it was a good foundation for our kids. It's not something that after sacrament we would go get a burrito.
Yeah.
Or he'd take Tyson and go get something. But no, he never stuck around for anything. No, he purposefully worked on Sunday so he didn't have to go.
There you go.
But everybody thinks he was just this.
Well, that's what they talked about at the funeral. I remember sitting at the funeral and almost every talk was, he was all about his church. That's what everyone likes to remember or say, right? Because it brings comfort.
I will make it very clear that at my funeral, there will be no reference to religion at all. It'll be a very secular funeral. Not that I should care once I'm dead. I mean, I really won't
Right.
care.
Oh, I will. I told my kids if there's a Mormon funeral for me, I am going to paranormal the shit out of the place. I'm going to be throwing shit. I am like, you burn my body, take a little bit of my ashes, take some of my money, go to Hawaii, and you guys all walk out into the ocean and let me be where I love to be.
There you go.
And every time you see a sunset, you just think of me. But
There you go.
if you don't go and get drunk after that, I'm going to paranormal you then too. So just no.
Drew, let me ask you one last question.
Sure. Yeah.
Since you've left the church and you've left the religion, do you have a joyful life?
Yeah. I have peace. And let me tell you something. And that peace is to borrow the ocean analogy. It undulates. It moves. This is undulation.
It flows.
It flows.
Yeah.
And there's some days that are hard and there's some days that are not. But I no longer think that my bad days are a result of me not being pious or righteous enough. I just think some days are bad.
Yeah.
Some days are just hard.
And that's a great outlook to have.
Yeah, and it's beautiful to say, I'm just going to sit in this shitty kind of day and just kind of be with whatever the universe is trying to inform in me right now. But it's not because God's mad at me. It's not because I didn't pay enough tithing. It's not because I didn't pray or read the Book of Mormon for the 27th time. It's just a bad day.
No more shame.
Yeah.
No more
No.
guilt.
No.
Well, no, and shame took a little bit longer just because of the sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, this idea that the shame, is the idea that we are wrong versus guilt, which is we did something wrong.
Right.
And when I finally realized, and even then, wrong becomes very subjective. What could be wrong for you may not be wrong for me.
Indeed.
You know, a glass of alcohol might be really bad for somebody who shouldn't drink again. But for me, it could be just a really nice way to end a day, you know. And you learn to not be so absolute. But yeah, I have days of peace.
Speaking of ending the day, I think this is a great spot to go ahead and close up this episode. Drew, thank you so much for being willing to sit down and talk to us. Yeah. Thank you for being vulnerable.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing your heartfelt story and all the things I didn't even have a clue about. Like,
really,
but I feel so connected to you even more than I ever have. And thank you so much for spending this time. I know you did not come to St. George for this, but
no, it worked out perfectly.
It did indeed.
So grateful.
Synchronicity.
Right?
That's Jung.
Yeah. Hey, and for all of you out there listening, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to what we have to say. Thank you for being so loyal and jumping on each week to hear our episodes. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Drew.
Absolutely. And we'll see you
on the other side of the veil.